Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. We're using the mic in part because we want to record this for others to listen to later. My name is Marty Orr. I'm the president of the Boise State University AFT Local 3537. Before I present our speaker, just wanted to plug the union a bit. We're a small group so far on campus, but we offer a lot of moral support, camaraderie. Benefits of membership in AFT include a $1 million legal defense insurance, and we've had some success over the last few years defending a few faculty and staff members from some problems that they have run into. So we're very hopeful that you will consider joining us. Here is the website. It's at orgs.boisestate.edu/BSU-AFT, and if you go to that site, down at the bottom of the menu list, there is a link where you can join us, and that would be great. Also, there's some handouts there for the presentation near the door, and a sign-up sheet. So again, if you decide you're not quite ready to join AFT, please do give us your contact information so we can get a hold of you as we move forward. Our speaker is James Russell, and he's a professor at Portland State University in the Hatfield School of Government. He's the author of 8 books, I believe it is, including Social Insecurity, 401ks and the Retirement Crisis, and those are available for sale outside. Pick one up and pick up one for your friends. So we'll announce this event again following this, but please help us spread the word. Let others know what you hear here today. So without further ado, let me ask that you hold questions, unless it's a quick clarification kind of thing, until we get to a Q&A. But again, without further ado, here is Dr. James Russell.
Thank you. Let me just, thank you. Let me just figure out how to work this apparatus here. Maybe you can help me.
Yeah.
Let's see. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Well, thanks a whole lot, Marty, for this invitation. And I really want to second what he said about the importance of joining the faculty union. I've actually been a member of the AFT in 3 different universities, and I would tell you that it's better to be in a bad union than no union at all. Not that AFT is a bad union, but it's really, really important. And there are just all kinds of valuable things that unions do, including hopefully getting involved in what I'm about to describe to you. Let me start with my own career and then kind of walk into what we ended up doing in Connecticut, which is something that you may want to consider doing in Idaho. I started my first really full-time job at the University of Texas at El Paso, and I was given a choice between being a part of the Texas Pension Fund or being a part of TIAA. Okay, this was in 1978, okay, which coincidentally was the same year that the 401k provision was added to the IRS code, okay, which I'll make some reference to later. So in some ways, my career paralleled the whole development of a retirement crisis in the United States. In 1978, I didn't know anything. Okay, so I was told here, you have to sign up for your retirement plan. I asked the clerk in the HR office, what should I do? And she said, well, people like you, they join TIAA, and TIAA is portable. So that's a good thing. And somewhere I remembered that TIAA was this kind of really creative retirement plan for professors who had careers that went from university to university. And so it made sense to me. Okay, so I signed it, and off I went. Okay, I then switched from there to Lewis and Clark College in Portland, which was in 1983, which was another short-term position. They had TIAA, I joined it. Okay, and then in 1986, I actually got a tenure track job in Connecticut, okay, at Eastern Connecticut State University. So, drove across country to Connecticut, and same sort of thing. In the HR office, I said, what retirement plan do you want? There's the state pension, which used to be a good deal, but it no longer is. And then there's TIAA, which is what all your colleagues do. So I kind of said, I guess TIAA. And at that moment, I made the biggest financial mistake of my entire life. Okay, and I'll explain that as we go forward. About a year later, we received a notice that our health plan, we could change from Blue Cross or to some other provider if we wanted to. There was an opportunity. And I said, because I was getting a little bit of cold feet about whether I had made the right choice on retirement. And so I asked if I could do that with the retirement plan. And they said, oh no, that's an irrevocable choice. They hadn't told me that when I signed it, okay? Meaning that I could never, ever, for my entire lifetime, get out of this plan, at least while I was at this employer. So I felt kind of bad about that. Then I went off. I had a Fulbright position in Mexico, was gone for a couple of years, came back, and began to look at the whole retirement issue a little bit more. And I decided to compare the TIAA, which now I had a number of years in it, so I had built up a certain accumulation in it, and compare it with what I would get in the state pension. And the way I did it, I mean, I was way too young at that time to actually retire, okay, is I pretended that I was 65 years old, okay, and then kind of ran out what the state benefit would be, and then I looked at what the TIAA accumulation would be good for. And I thought that they were going to be kind of close. I mean, because that's what I've been led to believe. Okay, that maybe there would be a couple of $1,000s difference, something like that. That was a trade-off for the portability of TIAA. Well, what I found out was that the TIAA would pay me half the benefits that the state pension would pay. Okay, and at the same time, I was making double the contributions to it that people in the pension plan were. And it's a little bit different in Idaho, okay, in terms of the contribution. Okay, but that was the situation in Connecticut, and I thought, well, I must have made a mistake in my calculations. I mean, it couldn't be that much of a difference, and so I ran them again, and it came out the same all the time. So I was pretty shocked, and I went to colleagues and I said, hey, look at this. Okay, and they kind of looked at me like, I don't know, I was crazy, because they believed that they were all becoming TIAA millionaires in the go-go 1990s when the stock market was really hot. Okay, and and I would try to explain it to them, and they would kind of check their watch and kind of roll their eyes, and they just didn't want to hear it. Okay, and so I grumbled about this for about 15 years. I said, come on, why doesn't anybody want to look at this? Okay, then 2008 happened. Okay, and if you were like the average, you lost anywhere from 1/4 to 40% of the value of your portfolio, okay, in the crash in 2008. On my particular campus, okay, we had a thing which I think you had. Okay, by this time, TIAA had been replaced by ING, okay, which is a Dutch multinational financial services firm. And so they were managing this account. And we had the same sort of thing that you have, that somebody from ING came to the campus to counsel us on our investments. Okay, I think you have that here, right? Okay. Okay, so we received an email that so-and-so is available to talk to you about your investments. Okay, well, this poor guy, they had the misfortune of coming the day after the stock market fell its greatest plunge, okay, in, ever since the crisis started. And we get this notice, and and I'm looking at the newspaper and I'm looking at this notice, and we had the ability there to hit reply to all. Okay, I don't think you have that here. Okay, but we could do that. It's a small campus. Okay, so I was feeling very snide. Okay, and I hit reply to all, and I said, would that also, he was offering financial counseling. Okay, would that also include psychological counseling, given what's happened to our retirement fund? Okay, and that then set off a round of gallows humor, okay, among my colleagues, about this, and that went on for a few days. And then at the end of it, I wrote to everyone, kind of my parting comment that the only solution to our problem would be if they allowed us to roll our accumulations into the state pension fund. And I didn't really expect anything to come of it because I'd had this experience of 15 years of people not wanting to hear it. So a few days later, I'm walking across campus, okay, and a professor from the English department, who I judged to be pretty conservative on campus, and she stopped me and she said, "Isn't there something we can do about this?" And I said, "I don't think so. Nobody wants to hear it." Okay, and she said, "No, it's different now. People are scared." Okay, so we got together, a kind of very unlikely couple, okay, and we wrote a letter of concern, which we got about a dozen faculty members to sign it, okay, and then we sent it out to the faculty. We had a real concern that this retirement plan was a failure that we were in. Okay, it wasn't going to provide the retirement that we needed. Well, this is a pretty small campus, much larger state system, and then there's another, public university system, and there are community colleges. Well, that email flew all over the state. Yeah, it got forwarded. I mean, we had kind of hit the crisis point on it and the anxiety. Okay, and so we were setting up a meeting, okay, to discuss this. Okay, and we very carefully said this is not a meeting in how to invest. Okay, this is a meeting in, whether it would be a good idea to try to get into the state pension fund, and if so, how we could do that. Okay, so we had that meeting. About 50 some odd people came to it. It was a very angry meeting. Okay, people were very upset about what had happened. I laid out the case for changing retirement plans. After that meeting, we set up our own group. Okay, we first had to convince our unions. Connecticut is much more of a union state than Idaho. Okay, and there's collective bargaining over benefits and so forth, but they didn't immediately latch on to this issue. Okay, we had to do this. So we set up a committee, started a mailing list, ended up with a website, quickly outgrew our small campus, became a statewide movement, and to make a long story short, okay, over 4 years, we won the right to move our money from what at that time was ING into the state pension plan. So I did this. Okay, I spent more money than I've ever spent in my life. Okay, in terms of, it wasn't everything I had in my account. Okay, but it was hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay, purchased 26 years of credit in the state pension fund, and as a result of that, when I did retire from Connecticut, and I'm sort of semi-retired because I'm teaching at Portland State. Okay, when I retired from Connecticut, I'm getting $24,000 a year more, okay, in retirement income than I would have if I had left the money in ING, and some part of it was still in TIAA. Okay, so I mean, it's just it's made all the difference. Okay, because essentially what you want in retirement, okay, is to maintain your standard of living. Okay, that's the goal. Okay, to do that, you don't want to go off your own personal fiscal cliff, okay, and have your income drop dramatically, and then you have to figure out what to do. Okay, whether you're going to move in with your adult children, you know, or something like that to make ends meet. Okay, you want to be able to live as you're accustomed to living. Okay, and I can say, you know, for myself personally, you know, I'm able to do that. Okay, and you know, and I'm not doing that to brag or anything like that, because there are a lot of other people who are in terrible shape in retirement. Okay, in this country, and that's what the retirement crisis is all about. Okay, so I mean, that's to make a long story short. Okay, what I want to do with you is to kind of explain the nuts and bolts of this, and as to why public pensions are a much better deal than things like TIAA, the investment savings schemes that they are. And you know, this is a subject that, you know, if you told me this 25 years ago that I would be doing this, I would have thought you were nuts. I kind of fell into this subject. It's become fascinating to me. And when I was leading this campaign over 4 years in Connecticut, I had to talk all over the state, and I wrote a newsletter that had 120 issues. I was answering questions all the time. So there's no better way to learn something than to be in a position like that when you're the person who's supposed to know, right? Okay, and I don't claim I know everything, okay, but I certainly know a lot more than when that campaign started. And I didn't come into that campaign with zero knowledge of it. Okay, so if you look at that handout sheet, okay, that I have, does everybody have a copy of it? There are two tables. Okay, let me get my copy of it. Okay. If you look at the side that says comparing PERSI and ORP approaches to retirement security. Okay, is everybody there? Okay. PERSI, the Public Employees Retirement System of Idaho, okay, is what is called technically a defined benefit plan. That means that the way in which the benefit is calculated is determined ahead of time. Okay, and that's just kind of where that word comes from. Okay, and so the employer, the state of Idaho, okay, is required to give you a certain benefit according to a formula, which we'll get to in a minute. Okay, and it's very important that this is guaranteed. Okay, that's a huge difference between this and the alternative. The alternative, which is the ORP, for which the optional retirement plan. Okay, I've looked at these things all over the country, and they're either called ORP or ARP. Okay, ORP if it's optional retirement plan, ARP if it's alternative or alternate retirement plan. They mean the same thing. Okay, but that's what they are. And they get what's called a third-party administrator to oversee it, to keep track of the records, to keep track of the contributions, and your third-party administrator is TIAA. Okay. That type of plan is what is called a defined contribution. Okay. The employer is required to make a certain contribution, but there's no guarantee of what the benefit will be. Okay, so defined contribution for defined benefit. You'll notice here, okay, in examples of this, that in terms of a defined benefit plan, Social Security is the one that most of you are familiar with. Okay, your Social Security benefit has nothing to do with Wall Street, okay, or how the stock market is going on. Okay, it depends upon your 35 highest earning years, okay, and they then have a formula that then calculates that, and you get notice of that regularly, what you can expect, okay, when you get there. The ORP, or the TIAA, is essentially a 401k, okay, which was what I was saying in 1978 was an accountant named Ted Benna basically went to the IRS and said, why don't we allow people to save for retirement tax-free? Okay, and then they kind of put that in. And what Benna wanted to do, I'm just doing a little bit of a tangent on this because it's an interesting one, is that he essentially wanted to find a way that people could just have independent savings on the side. Because the way in which retirement theorists always talked about retirement, or preparing for it, was the three-legged stool. Okay, you may have heard that. Okay, Social Security, a pension, and savings. Okay, and if you look back in 1978, okay, if you had a retirement plan at work, it was a pension in the great majority of cases. Okay, and so he was looking for a way that people could just kind of add a little bit to this in a way that the government would support it by deferring the taxes on it. Okay, this gets passed, okay, and then Ronald Reagan comes into the White House in 1981, and the first question, not the first question he's confronted with, but a question his administration is confronted with, is that a number of employers, kind of egged on by the financial services industry, began thinking, well, maybe the 401k will not just be supplemental savings, but we can actually replace pensions with it. Okay, but that was ambiguous. Okay, in 1981, the Reagan administration Treasury Department announced that that was permissible. Okay, and then, okay, it took off. Okay, like that. The 401k industry took off, and now most people who have retirement plans at work have 401ks, okay, except for public employees. We're kind of a last redoubt, okay, of the traditional pension. Okay, at first, the 401k was promoted as better than the pension, okay, and nobody really knew, because it just started. Okay, and they would give all these very optimistic projections of what people could expect when they retired. But again, this is all speculation. Okay, well, by the time you get to 2000 or so, you're beginning to have some people who are trying to retire on these things, and they're beginning to realize that it's actually quite the opposite. Okay, they really they're not able to build up enough money in them to be able to retire and maintain their standard of living. And so it kind of goes from, I've got a new 401k to I've only got a 401k. Kind of the whole attitude toward it shifts as people begin to realize, okay, that it's not quite as good. Okay, anyway, back onto the table. Okay, in the case of Idaho, okay, you can see the contributions, which are percent of salary. Okay, they're fairly comparable. How much is paid into PERSI and how much is paid into TIAA and ORP. Okay, the employee, you pay a percentage of salary, and then your employer pays a percentage of salary. Now, here's something that we didn't know when we started all of this. I mean, we knew that the pension was a much better deal for employees, okay, but we assumed that it was very expensive for the employer to give a benefit that high, okay, and that they were just shorting us. They were supporting the people in the pension, but they weren't supporting us. Okay. It's only when we began to understand this more that we realized that actually the pension costs the employer less than the TIAA does. Okay. Now, to understand that, you have to look into pension finances. Okay, pensions have two parts, okay, in terms of what has to be paid into them. One part is what is called the normal cost, okay, and that's calculated by actuaries, okay, who look at the age distribution of the population that's being insured. Okay, and did I put this down here? Oh, I left this out. Okay, this essentially, when you buy a pension, you're buying insurance. Okay, what are you insuring yourself for? Okay, in the very strange language of this world, you're insuring yourself against the risk that you live too long. Now, I happen to think that's not a risk, that's a good thing, right? I live long. Okay, but the risk is really not that you're living long, it's that you're outliving your money. Okay, that's what you're insuring yourself. Okay, so when you get a pension, okay, this is for the rest of your life, whether it's short or whether it's long. Okay, if it's short, you kind of lose because you pay more into the system than you get out of it. Okay, if you live a long time, you win. Okay, right? Because you get more out of the system than you put into it. Okay, but it's kind of like this. Okay, if you own a house, you buy fire insurance, right? Okay, now you kind of win, okay, if your house burns down and you collect, and you kind of lose, okay, if your house doesn't burn down. But either way, you're winning, right? I mean, you don't want your house to burn down, okay? But you want the peace of mind of knowing that should it burn down, okay? So even if you die early, okay, first off, it's like the Woody Allen joke, okay? You know, when you die, you're unconscious, okay? Okay, it's not like you're going to wake up and say, oh, I should have done something else with my money, right? You know, it's whether you live short or whether you live long, it's the peace of mind of knowing that you have economic security. That's what you're trying to gain here. Okay, so you have the normal cost, but then most pension funds, okay, have managed to get themselves into a little bit of hot water because they have not put in enough contributions. They've shorted the contribution. And this has especially happened in states. Okay, the legislature is working on the budget. Okay, you know, it's got all the demands for the budget. Okay, and it can't quite balance it. Okay, well, we'll just short the payment to the pension system because it won't cause a crisis, because it doesn't. Okay, but it's kind of like if you're paying your mortgage payment on your house and you decided to pay, you know, $100 less, okay, because you have some other expenses you've got to take care of, okay, I mean, that's going to catch up with you eventually. And that's what's happened with the states. So in addition to the normal cost, they have to pay an additional cost for the unfunded liability. Okay, so all of this is publicly available. That's why me sitting in Oregon could figure this out for Idaho, okay, is that if you look at the normal cost, it's actually less than the cost for TIAA for the employer. Okay. Now, you know, in the Q&A, you want to, I mean, we can, you know, straight, if I'm kind of, you know, if this is confusing, okay, but I figured, like, if everybody were to move from TIAA to the pension fund, the state of Idaho would save $6 million a year. Okay? Now, not everybody's going to want to move, but it's just an indication that any argument that it's too expensive for the state is wrong. It's actually a good deal for the state for this, which is one of the ways that you can talk to legislators and so forth. Okay, then you go down here. Here's, you know, one of the, you know, the biggest things is the whole issue of risk. Okay, with a plan like PERSI, okay, all of the market risk is for the employer. Okay, so if the market goes down, okay, as it did in 2008, okay, the employer has to figure out a way to make it up to employees. That's their problem. Yeah. On the other hand, if you're in TIAA, the risk is yours, okay, of your investment. You know, nobody's going to make that up for you. Yeah. So, you know, if you go around campus here and talk to people who are in PERSI, probably in 2008, I mean, they weren't concerned about the stock market. Okay, stock market goes up, goes down, doesn't affect them. That's their employer's problem. Okay, but you know, those of us, okay, who were in a plan like this, what's going to happen? You know, I mean, and it gets very real. I mean, you have people whose health is not very good. You know, I mean, so you can hardly tell them, well, just keep working for a few more years, and the market will turn around. You know, so you know, people can get quite nervous when something like this, and for quite good reasons. Now, the benefits. Okay, PERSI is like other pension funds. It's based on the number of years that you work. Okay, these are called technically service credits. You multiply it by some multiplier. Okay, in the case of PERSI, it's 0.02, which is actually a very generous multiplier compared to other state pension funds. Okay, and then you multiply that by the final salary. Okay, and that gives you what your pension will be. Okay. I can tell you that PERSI is more generous than the pension plan that I have, okay, from Connecticut. Okay, so it's kind of up there in generosity. Now, the other side is with what you're supposed to do with TIAA. Okay, and in my experience, you know, with talking to many groups of people in TIAA or similar plans like that, is everyone understands that you have to build up an accumulation in it. Okay, and that's called the accumulation phase. Okay, but then what happens when you actually retire? You don't get a pension. Okay, several things can possibly happen, okay, depending upon how the rules of your plan are written. Okay, one is you could take it all as a lump sum. Okay, and there are probably here you have retirement advisors, okay, who as you're approaching retirement say, here, roll the money to me and I will invest it, okay, so that you will get more than what you would otherwise get. Be extremely wary. That's all I can say. Be extremely wary of that. But it's a huge business that's out there, okay, of retirement advisors, because they take a fee for doing this that's even higher than the TIAA fee that it's taking. You know, the average is 1%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's 1% of the total accumulation, okay, and that's whether, you know, they make money or it goes down. You know, so it's a considerable amount of money. Okay, if you have a 1% fee, okay, you lose minimally, okay, over a 25-year period, 30% of the gain of your account. Okay, and that's why the whole issue of fees is a big issue that's out there. Okay, so let's say you have $200,000 in it. Okay, and you're not going to take it out as a lump sum. Okay, what are you going to do? Okay, well, you can read the Sunday paper, and there are all kinds of advice that's out there what you should possibly do. Okay, one is what used to be called the 4% rule. Okay, take out 4% of what you have. Okay, and then, you know, that'll keep you going for 25 years. No guarantees, folks, but if you do it at 4%. They've now lowered that to now 3 point something. Okay, It's not good. Now, okay, let's say you have 200,000. What's 4% of 200,000? $8,000. Okay. I don't know how well you think you can live on $8,000. Okay. I couldn't live particularly well on $8,000. But then again, some people have more, some people have less, and we're getting to that part in a minute. Then the third thing that you can do, okay, which is what was the original idea around this, is that you can take this money and purchase an annuity. Okay. An annuity is a product by a life insurance company, okay, where you give them your money, okay, and then they promise to give you a certain income for the rest of your life. Okay, so it's most comparable to a pension. Okay, now, a life insurance company, I mean, they have actuarials, they calculate all of this, and they're kind of hoping that you'll die early. I don't know that they do anything to make sure that that's true, okay? Because if you die early, then you pay more than you receive. And they've got it all figured out about how long you're likely to live. And that's the basis on which they sell those. Now, in a minute, I'll get to what those rates are when we get to the other table. Okay, but I have to throw this in. There's not a whole lot of humor in this subject, but I have to find it where we can. Okay, the best description of a life insurance company I ever heard is that it's a cross between a bank and a casino. Because betting, the house is betting on your lifetime. Okay, then very important is whether whatever retirement income you have has a cost of living adjustment, meaning that you're not going to have a flat income. As inflation goes up, it becomes less and less. PERSI has what's called the COLA, cost of living adjustment, and you can buy annuities that also have something like that. So it's possible to get that on the private side also. Okay. And then what I said before, the whole question of the guaranteeing of the benefit, yes versus no, okay, on it. Okay, all right. If you flip over this, okay, what I tried to do in this table, which is what I did in Connecticut, is that it's very hard to know how people are doing in their TIAA, okay, and it's not like I can, go up to you and say, how much money have you got in your account? You're going to tell me none of your business, right? It's like me asking you, how much do you have in your checking account? Yeah, so we had this problem in Connecticut. How do you talk about it when you have an audience full of people that you have no idea how well they've done it? So I figured out a workaround, okay, which just as a parenthetical comment, okay, as a part of the research that I did for the book, I went to Chile, okay, where they had their whole Social Security privatized in the 1980s, and were coming to the same conclusions we were in Connecticut. Okay, that was a very bad deal, and they had actually developed the same workaround I had, okay, which is to figure out how much money you need to get something equivalent to what you would get for a PERSI, pension. Okay, so that's what this is all about. Okay, so you can kind of look at it and say, okay, am I on track to get that? Okay, or is this like telling me I have to have so much money that I'll never ever have it? Okay, so column number 1, since PERSI is set up on the basis of your final income, okay, you get a percentage of it. Okay, I'm assuming somebody who's worked for 25 years. Okay, so if somebody's final salary is $30,000, it would be 25% 25 years times 0.02, which gives you 50% of the 30,000, or they would get a pension of 15,000. Okay? Everybody clear? Okay. Now.
That's the annual payout?
Yes, that's annual. Okay. Okay. That's for somebody with a $30,000 salary. Now, obviously, it goes up the more money people have. Okay, in their salary, because it's based on the final salary. Okay. Now, so the question becomes, okay, how much money would this person have to accumulate in TIAA to buy an annuity that would be comparable, that would pay out, okay, have a payout that was $15,000 a year? Okay, well, there's a way to do that. Okay, and you can go online. There's something called Annuity Shopper, okay, which compares all the costs. Okay, and you know this can be done. It's very, very easy to do that, and that's what's done here. Okay. Now, that person would have to pay, if they were a male, $347,222 for this. Okay, to get. They would have to have at least that amount in their account, okay, to get this.
But they purchased the annuity with.
Right.
I'm assuming that the difference between the male and female is because of actuarial tables and women live longer? Is that it?
Well, we're getting there. Okay, we're getting there. Okay, have patience. Okay, and the female, 375,940. And you might go, well, wait a second. Why do women have to pay more than men? They live longer. That's fair, isn't it?
Absolutely.
We're all supposed to be about critical thought here, right? You know, okay. What if I told you that rich people live longer than poor people, but they don't charge rich people more for their annuities than they do poor people? Okay. In fact, this is an issue in a number of international courts that's being dealt with plans like this, is that it's still legal to discriminate against women, okay, in the annuities market. Okay. Yes, it is true that women live longer, but there's absolutely no evidence that they have less of a need for income than men do, right? Okay, you know, everybody needs more or less the same. And by law, public pensions have to blend their assumptions so that the payout cannot be different for a male versus a female. Okay, that's just the, you know, the way it is. Okay. Now, you look down this. Okay, and again, I don't know how much money you have in your account or anything, okay, but in all of my experience with this, very, very rare do I run across somebody who's, you know, there. Okay, and if they're there, it usually means that they've done a lot of extra savings into it. Okay, it's not been because they're a crackerjack investor or something like that. Okay, it's because they've been there for a really long time. Okay, but if they've been there for a really long time, they usually can't get, you know, the type of pension they would otherwise get for that number of years. You know, so you know, I kind of hope that you know, my you know, presentation so far will indicate to you that you're not going to get as much, okay, from TIAA, and it's not going to be even close. Okay, you know, so okay, all right. So that, I mean, that was what motivated us to go through this 4-year battle, okay, which we actually won, and you know, when we started it, the first thing they told us was, this is impossible. You can't do this. Okay. Some people actually told us it was illegal, what we were proposing. Okay. Well, I'm yeah, I want to tell you, while we were doing it, I was studying parallel efforts in other states, talking to people who are doing it in other states, and it has been done in maybe not the majority of states, but we have enough precedents that are out there. And it's been, there have been a number of different motives to it. Some has been like, what we did in Connecticut, which was a kind of rank and file movement. In the case of Florida, I think it came out of the bureaucracy itself because they knew it would benefit the state pension plan, and so they just offered it to people. Unfortunately, they did it in a very bad way in that they didn't really explain it, and a lot of people were confused and didn't really understand what was going on. So there are all these kinds of variations that are out there. Let's see. I said I would deconstruct why the pension pays more than the TIAA. Okay, and I'll give you 3 reasons. Okay, one is the assumption that when you do one of these accounts is that you know what you're doing. Okay, that you're like a professional investor. No. Okay, I mean, there may be some people in this room and elsewhere who really understand investing and can somehow do something comparable to what the big investment houses can do, but in most cases, no. And when it comes to investing, most people are rank amateurs at it. Okay, and it's like walking into a casino, okay, where you really don't know how to play poker, and then you're playing against experts. Okay, I mean, it's totally loaded against you. Whereas with the pension fund, they have professional investors. So pension funds always outdo these types of accounts in terms of returns. Number 2, what I mentioned before is the whole drain off of fees. Okay. I think any skilled accountant would be challenged to actually track down how much money is scooped off of these accounts. Okay, it's in the news now because there are attempts at reforms to kind of control this in some kind of way. Okay, but I would argue that even if they get it down to a reasonable control, okay, it's still, not a good thing. Okay, I mean, you're still going to lose a considerable chunk of money. So if you look at kind of why between the 1980s and now the financial part of the economy has mushroomed, a large part of it has been the shift over from pensions to these types of accounts. Okay, we're fueling the growth of the big finance houses, okay, on Wall Street. And then number 3, which is I think the largest of all the reasons, is the difference between social insurance and savings and investment. Okay, that social insurance, like with Social Security, because it's set up in a way, okay, that the short-lived subsidize the long-lived, okay, it can deliver higher benefits than you would get just as an individual doing it. Okay, if I can go back to my example of fire insurance, nobody who has a house is going to try to self-insure themselves, because that would mean they would have to put aside a savings account that was equal to the value of the house, right? So instead you pay a small amount, okay, in hopes that your house doesn't burn down, but if it does burn down, you're covered, right? And that's a much better way to go about it. Okay, yet with retirement, we're being asked to essentially self-insure, okay, to build up enough amount of money to cover us in case we live to be 110. Very few of us are going to live to be 110, but I mean, you see the point that I'm making. Okay, much better to enter into this together as a pool, okay, and then the money gets distributed in that kind of way. Okay. Now, I'll just finish up and then we can go to Q&A here. What we did in Connecticut, which is not the only model, okay, that's out there, but it's the one I obviously know the best, is that we started as a small committee, okay, that got people who are interested in the reform, started a newsletter, okay, kept people informed of what was going on. Okay, it became a rank and file movement of 7 different unions, meaning it didn't come out of the leadership of the unions, but it came from below. But we knew that we needed the unions. They had resources we didn't have, including money. We didn't have a dime. Okay, but we wanted them to do the right thing. Okay, and unions, I mean, I'm a real union person, okay, but I understand why they're not going to jump on every possible reform. They also thought this was impossible. Okay, this is pie in the sky. You know, so why are we going to waste a bunch of effort on something that's futile? Okay, well, the only way we could kind of move them off of that position was when we had more and more of their members demanding that they do that. And that's how we did it. You know, we had people from all the different unions on our steering committee, okay, not the leadership, but, you know, rank and file members who understood the issue and who, you know, were then convincing their coworkers and so forth. Did a web page, which then scared up all kinds of people who stumbled onto it in one way or another. And I would get emails, and I don't know how many Starbucks I went to sit down with somebody and spend 2 or 3 hours on, you know, talking about this, okay, and you know, and so it's that kind of person-to-person thing. One thing I would really advise against is if you propose this reform, somebody in the state or the university says, well, this is really interesting. We're going to form a committee, and you can be on the committee, okay, and then we'll see about it, okay. I mean, that's all fine and good to be on that committee, and it's important, but don't stop mobilizing pressure on the system, okay. The minute you stop mobilizing pressure on the system, there's going to be a certain inertia, and this is, you know, it's a squeaky wheel, you know, gets oiled, to use the cliche, and you've really got to squeak, okay, to get people to, you know, really move on it. I mean, you'll have people in the state bureaucracy who will understand that the state will benefit, okay, but still won't want to do it because it'll mean a lot of work to do it. And it will mean a lot of work. Okay, I mean, a lot of work on your part, a lot of work on their part. Okay, and you know, quite possibly they're understaffed. You know, all of that. I mean, the same thing goes for unions. Yeah, I mean, unions are dealing with problems all over the place, and you've got to make it clear that this is a problem you want them to pay attention to. Okay, and I would argue that in terms of the economic potential, this is the most important thing you can do. This is much more important than fighting for a raise. Okay, yeah, fighting for a raise is a good thing. Okay, I'm not opposed to that. Okay, but I mean, this is huge. Okay, you know, in terms of the difference between the retirement income you could potentially get versus what you're likely to get. So it's really worth all the work that it'll take to go into it. Okay, I think I should probably stop at that. People usually have lots of questions, and I'm more than happy to answer them. Yes?
Okay, you addressed one of my biggest fears in the state's pension plan when you talked about how states would short money paid into the pension plans, and that's what this employer unfunded liability is.
Right.
It like an insurance issue for the pension plan to make sure there's going to be enough money? Can you explain what that employer unfunded liability is and does?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there are different ways to finance pensions. Okay, the original way that they were financed were what were called pay-as-you-go systems. Okay, so The legislature might collect money, might not collect money from people, and then when people retired, they would just pay out of the budget. Okay, in some cases, the pension budget was just a part of the state budget. Okay, it wasn't separated from it. Okay. Then in the 1980s, you get a reform. Some of it is federal. Okay, some of it is just kind of best practices. The whole idea of pre-funding, that you should set aside an amount of money that's big enough to then fund these pensions. Okay. And so that becomes the measuring stick. Okay. So like in the case of PERSI, what would happen, okay, if tomorrow PERSI ended, okay, as a system, okay, and had to pay out all the rest of the pensions of people who had earned them in it, plus pay money to people who hadn't retired yet but had earned credit in? Could it do it? Okay, what amount of money would it take? Okay, and well, what we find is some pension funds can do that. That's 100% funded. We actually have a number of pension funds that are overfunded. Okay, the Washington Post, when Jeff Bezos bought it, the guy from Amazon, he found that he had bought a pension fund that was 150% funded. So that's a very successful pension fund. So you would think you would keep that going. He ended it because they're eyeing that extra 50% of something else they can do with it. Okay, it's one of the biggest rip-offs in this whole business, and part of the reasons why a lot of private pensions, have gone down is because that happened. They swept the overfunding, and then when the market goes down, they say, "Oh, this is underfunded." Well, anyway, so back to the heart of your question. Okay, so there is a kind of measuring stick of how much money needs to be set aside, and the different state pension funds have different parts of that measuring stick. In the case of Idaho, it's about 90% funded. That's excellent, excellent. Okay, for public pension funds, 80% is actually considered fully funded. Okay, because states, they're going to be here forever. Okay, at least as far as we're concerned. Okay, when the market goes down, they have years to make up the loss. So if you're 80% funded, or 90% in the case of Idaho, nobody can argue that this pension fund's in bad shape. It's in excellent shape.
So that's today. Is there a requirement, a law that says we have to stay at a minimum 90%, or could that go up and down depending on the
Yeah, that's somewhat complicated. Okay, in the private sector, there's what's called the annual required contribution, okay, or the ARC, which every year they look at how much is there, and then they say, well, how much do you have to put in to get it going toward where it's supposed to be? There is not that law for public pensions, however. Okay, so it becomes a difference between states. Okay, my state, Connecticut, is only 42% funded. Am I losing sleep over that? No, because back in 1990, it was 40% funded. Okay, and there's been 1990, 10, 20, 6 years ago. Okay, nobody has lost a pension payment. Okay, there's no danger of that coming. You can continue as a pension fund at a very low funding ratio. I mean, it's a good idea to have a higher one, okay, but there's no crisis.
Is there any danger for people 30 years down the road retired?
Not really. I mean, they would have to do something so irresponsible with that. Okay, and in Illinois. Okay, in the history of the United States, no state pension fund has ever failed to make a payment to a retiree, okay, the required payment. None, zero. Cities have done that, okay, but states are different. Okay.
Yeah.
So in the state of Idaho, I believe all state employees other than university employees are funded by PERSI. So why would it be very hard for them to switch university staff faculty member to a systematic role? It seems like it's
Yeah. You know, I mean, I think your question is an answer at the same time, right? In that there's no reason why they can't do this. Okay. Now, why they actually did it in the first place, I can only speculate, and you have to look into the history of it. Was it 1990 when they did this, or 1990? Okay. That happened in a number of states, not a large number, but there were a lot of hype about 401k approach and all of that, and there were a number of things going on internationally. There was even a growing consensus in the Democratic Party over some form of privatization of Social Security, okay, and so that seemed like a logical thing to do. Okay, and then, part of the idea was that professors, were capable of running their own retirement plans. The do-it-yourself approach. Okay, I mean, that's one possible scenario. It was imposed on you. Another is that it was self-inflicted. Okay, that is that somebody started agitating from inside, saying that we don't want this pension fund anymore. We can do much better with our own investing. I don't know what the actual history of it, but I know what the result is. So, yeah.
But doesn't that hurt us if we are ones that want to switch it back so that we can?
I can't hear you.
I say, doesn't the fact that we are a very limited and small group hurt us in trying to get the groundswell of we need to have this changed, as opposed, like you say, when you were changing it, you were able to get all these different groups around the state to say they wanted to change. It's just the universities. How likely is it that we're able to get that groundswell going and get a change?
Yeah, well, in Connecticut, we were, probably 98% university employees, who we were the only ones who had this, this type of plan. Every other state worker had, the state pension fund. So, we were able to do that, and I think proportionately it's similar to Idaho. Also, one of the states I know pretty well because we were in frequent contact during this, because it was the neighboring state of Massachusetts. Okay, and so I know very well the person who led that. We were on the phone all the time, comparing information, and they had the same situation, and they were able to carry it off.
How long did it take?
Well, in Connecticut, it took 4 years. In Massachusetts, I think it took about 4 years also, maybe 5. They had to go through the legislature. We went through the collective bargaining route, okay, to get it. Okay, but then again, it was just a different situation there. Yours would undoubtedly be through the legislation. Yes.
What are the general arguments that are used to counter a movement like this, and who are the people who he's struggling against?
Yeah. Well, first, you have people who think they're better off, okay, in TIAA, and in most cases they're mistaken. I mean, I'll just put it out there like that. They really don't understand this. They've fallen for, a lot
Ownership
of
society.
things like that. In other cases, they might be people who don't intend to stick around very long. And they think they're going to get the call from Harvard for their position or something like that. And then when that doesn't come, they begin to worry more about their long-term financial stability. On the side of the state, you may have legislators who are very libertarian, very free market oriented, very prone to the influence of the American Legislative Exchange Council, okay, which advocates against state pension funds. Okay, and so there's an ideological opposition, among them.
Financial industry too?
Yes, in the case of Massachusetts, TIAA, which had the contract, actively lobbied the legislature against the reform. Because if they lose control of the money, they lose their fee. And this is millions of dollars to them every year. So you have to be prepared for that. Okay, but even with all that, we've gotten that type of reform in states with very Republican legislatures. West Virginia, one of them. Okay, Florida was another. Okay, and you don't put it forth as a partisan issue. You put it forth as something to save the state money. Okay, you can also put it forth that it's in the interest of the state that people have a secure retirement so that they don't have to go on public assistance, and then the state has to support them later on. And then I think an argument that, who was it here, was making that most of the members of the legislature are members of PERSI, so they don't want to do in their retirement system. And this will help that retirement system because the more money that comes into it, the better. And it will help it both it'll help the state budget because it's less of a cost. It helps the pension fund because it lowers the percentage of its unfunded liability. Because you all would come in at full value. Okay, you're not coming in with any unfunded liability, and so that benefits the pension fund. Yes, ma'am.
I have TIAA prep, I have PERSI, I have TIAA prep from where I worked at other universities. And can I just sell that and put it in my PERSI and just do it on an individual basis?
Okay, let me see if I understand, because I have a little trouble hearing it. But you're basically asking, how would this work? Yeah. Okay. And I think it's a variation of the cost of what it would, the variation of the question, what would this cost, right? Okay. Well, I can't tell you the answer because there are two major ways in which this is calculated, and they're both different. Okay. One way is what's called the looking backward approach, which was what was done in Massachusetts, where they would go to you, okay, and they would look at your records. Let's say you'd worked for 20 years, okay, and whatever year that was 20 years ago, they would start and say, well, how much did the state put in? How much did you put in? Okay, and then all that amount, they would add that up, and then they would have some kind of interest rate that would be on top of it, and that would be your price tag, okay, to buy 20 years. Okay, that's the looking backward approach. What we got in Connecticut was what was called the looking forward approach, okay, which was what will it cost the state to insure this person in retirement, meaning to give them this pension. Yeah, how long is this person likely to live? So we had to give them our age, okay, and then our final salary, and and so forth, and then they did a calculation based on that, which in general is higher cost than the one on the looking backward, okay, approach. But either one of them was an infinitely good deal, okay, for us, okay, in terms of getting much more retirement income than we otherwise would have gotten. So I paid, I don't know if I'm repeating myself, I paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to get 26 years credit, and I didn't lose a wink of sleep over it. Okay.
And would that be true for people regardless of where they were in terms of, is that going to...
Yeah, you have to speak up.
Is there going to be a difference in terms of risk or benefit, accrual, whether somebody is close to retirement, depending on how close to retirement they are? If, let's say this were ready to go into effect, right? people closer to retirement are going to have to be savvy in terms of whether this would actually be beneficial, right?
Yeah.
In a way that people with a longer.
Okay.
Let me rephrase that question.
Thank you.
a little bit. So let's say you've worked 30 years, you're ready to retire, and the program starts that year.
Yeah.
Are you going to end up getting the same amount from PERSI, even if your TIAA prep account was measly small? Would you get the same amount from PERSI?
Yeah.
Somebody
Okay.
who's been in PERSI for 30 years.
Yeah. If I understand the question, and you can correct me if I don't, okay, what happens if you don't have enough money? Okay.
Because you're not, according to you, hardly anyone's going to have enough money.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that anyone who has just put in the minimum, hadn't put in anything extra, they probably will not have enough money. Okay, but what happens at that point, let's say you have 30 years, in the system, is you may have enough money to buy 25 years or 23 years or something like that. Okay, and if you buy that, okay, that's still the best investment opportunity you'll ever have in your life in terms of, getting an amount of money back that's guaranteed for the rest of your life. Yeah, I mean, I counseled hundreds of people in Connecticut, okay, and I did run into people who did not have enough money. It seemed like kind of the younger people were, the more likely they had enough money. Because they have all these ways of calculating, because they figure out how much money they can make off of the money and all that, that you pay them. And if they've got longer holding it, they can make more money off of it, and so forth. Okay, whereas people who are closer to retirement, okay, unless they had put in extra money or they were carrying money from another job into it, they were less likely to have it. But most people seem to have it one way or another. Is that more or less addressing your question?
Thank you.
Okay.
What are the two most successful sort of strategies for convincing, so the best rhetorical arguments in favor of this when we're fighting against TIAA, et cetera, that's going to save the state money, right?
Yeah.
Is the biggest one it seems.
Okay, I'm again having trouble hearing.
Oh,
It's my problem, not your problem. But
you probably already covered it. I'll ask later.
yeah.
You can't talk. Oh yeah, okay. So Lynn just asked how it is that we calculate that $6 million, I think there's a $6 million.
Right.
How do we calculate, or how is that calculated?
Okay.
How do we do that?
Okay. What I did is I found the total amount of money that had been contributed by the employer to TIAA, its side of it, okay, which represented 9 point something or other percentage. Okay, and then I said, well, what would have happened if instead of contributing that, it had contributed a percentage less, which was 7 point something, which is what the normal cost would be. Okay, and the difference between what it had to contribute and what it would have contributed with a normal cost if the money were in the other side of it is where the $6 million figure comes. I mean, anybody wants to email me, I can, I can, lay it out a little more clearly to you. But I'm pretty confident with that calculation. Well, anything else? Okay, let me say, I have my email address on there. If anybody has a question, don't think you're bothering me. I actually like to talk about this stuff. And I have, answered many, many email questions. Okay, and most of them I've heard. Okay, so it's not like I have to do a lot of work on it. And so I'll be more than happy to, if questions occur to you after you leave.
Thanks, Jim. And again, some books are on sale out there. We are going to go to dinner after this. If anyone wants to join us, that would be wonderful.
Thanks again.
Thank you. Let me just plug the book a little bit. The book tells the whole story of this in Connecticut, but that's only a small part of it. It tells the much bigger thing about 401ks and the politics of all of this and why the retirement crisis is something people should care about. Okay? Thank you.